Hi everyone, I'm Sean, and today I'm going to be ranking the 21 books I set out to read in 2021. At the start of the year, I made this list of 21 books to read in 2021, so here we go with the follow-up. I am going to be using a pretty typical tier system. S-tier books are basically the best books ever written. They are flawless masterpieces. A tier is a book that is really good, but just not the best book ever written. B tier is a book that is definitely worth reading. Of these, S, A, and B tier count as recommended reads from me. C tier is a book that is just okay. I can't really say anything good or bad about it. D tier, even though it sounds really bad, is a book that I just personally could not get into. Maybe I tried to read 20, 30 pages, whatever, and the book just was not doing anything for me, so I could not get into it. And finally, E tier is a book that, for whatever reason, I really had an issue with it and likely rage quit. So let's do it. The first book is Nicholas Sparks, The Best of Me. I've read several Nicholas Sparks books, and kind of what I've came to the conclusion is the first few books I read from him, which were The Choice, A Walk to Remember, Safe Haven, and maybe another one. I liked the first few books I read from him, but ever since then I just cannot really get into any Nicholas Sparks story. They all feel kind of the same. I know where they're all going, and I just don't really enjoy them. I do think he is a good writer and a good storyteller, but just after reading 3 or 4 books by him, just nothing works for me anymore by him. So, The Best of Me I would put in D tier, but if it was the first book I ever read from Sparks, I would probably like it pretty well, but as it is, when I read it, it goes in D tier. The second book was Michael Crichton, Prey. And this is very much the same case with Nicholas Sparks. The first few books I read by Michael Crichton, Jurassic Park, Airframe, Congo, The Great Train Robbery, Jurassic World, I like those all pretty well. But after that, Michael Crichton books just don't really work for me. And it's the same thing with Sparks. If I read this book first, I would probably have enjoyed it, but since I've read those other Michael Crichton books, I just get tired of it pretty easily. So, Prey by Michael Crichton also goes into D tier. The third book was Into the Black by Beth Barney. This book I would just have to put into C tier. It didn't really stand out to me, but I may not be the target reader. The book was okay, so I would say C tier. Fourth is A Wild Ride Through the Night by Walter Moores. Now, I did give this one a 5-star rating, and I did greatly enjoy it. But would I put it alongside books such as The City of Dreaming Books, Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine, The Hunt for Red October? Would I put it alongside those books? And not quite. So I would say A Wild Ride Through the Night by Walter Moores goes into A tier. Fifth was Jules Verne, A Journey to the Center of the Earth. Now, kind of like Sparks and Michael Crichton, I really kind of like the first couple books I read by Jules Verne, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and Around the World in 80 Days. I did not really like this book too much. I had a lot of problems with it. So I'm going to put it in C tier. If you really like science fiction or you just love Jules Verne, you'll probably enjoy it fine. But I was kind of disappointed by it. I wanted more from Verne. So I would put A Journey to the Center of the Earth into C tier. Sixth was The Readers of Broken Wheel Recommend by Katerina Bavald. I saw this book at, I don't know where, Target maybe, and I saw it was a debut novel, so I got it kind of just wanting to support a debut novelist. And even though it's a book about books, which usually should be pretty good, I just never really got into this book. Just nothing about it stood out to me, so I would just have to put it into D tier. 7 was Ian Fleming Goldfinger. Now, this book did pretty much kill the James Bond series for me. I only had like 2 Ian Fleming James Bond books left to read, but Goldfinger was kind of my last hurrah for Fleming. I just have so many problems with his books. Goldfinger, I'm going to reluctantly put it into C tier. And the main reason I do that is because I don't think, or actually I did rage quit, but I did read like 50% of it really. So I guess it's okay, but I just have so many problems with Ian Fleming that, anyway, Goldfinger, reluctantly put it in C tier. 8 was Tennessee Williams, A Streetcar Named Desire. I had very low expectations for this one because I do not like plays very much. And my thoughts on this were, it was really just okay. The main thing about it was it wasn't long, so it wasn't real difficult to read or anything. I still do not think it's any kind of a classic. I have not seen the play, so I don't know, maybe it's different seeing the play. But the actual screenplay, a streetcar named Desire, I didn't see anything special about it, so I would just put it into C tier. 9 was James Agee, Let Us Now Praise Famous Men. I did not know what to expect of this book. The problem with this book, Let Us Now Praise Famous Men, was it had derogatory language, basically. It had the N-word for black people. And there are parts where it talks about like the black Americans singing a N-word song. And I'm just like, why is there this language in this book? And I know it's like the Times or whatever. I mean, that was a more common word. But there were other words than that. You could have just said black Americans or just black, or Negro was the kind of politically correct word back then. But it uses the N word instead. So right away I was just like, I am not really enjoying this. Nope, I can't read it. So Let Us Now Praise Famous Men goes into E tier. 10th is Humphrey Clinker by Tobias Smollett. And I am actually still reading this one, and I'm not too far into it. I'm just over 40 pages. Now, I will say that I'm not done reading this one yet because I've not really came to a conclusion. I think I'm enjoying it. I can't really tell quite so much right now. But for now, I am going to put this book into B tier. And I still need to read it to get a more positive conclusion on where it could go. So it could still slip into C tier, or it could rocket all the way up to A or S tier. I don't know. For now, I am putting it into B tier. I am reading it and I'm kind of enjoying it, and I think there is some good potential. So Tobias Smollett, Humphrey Clinker goes into B tier. 11 was The Complete Plays of Sophocles. Now, I have read quite a bit of Greek theater, I guess, or Greek plays. I've read some Aristophanes and Aeschylus and a few others. Sophocles, I actually enjoy more than any of those. I don't know if it's just the translation or if it's his actual plays, or if I'm kind of warming up to Greek theater because I'm more aware now of the stories that they wrote about, because they're all kind of based on the same characters largely, especially like post-Trojan War. They're all kind of derived from that in some way, a lot of these plays by these poets, Aeschylus, Aristophanes, Sophocles, and such. But I really kind of enjoy these plays by Sophocles. So I would put this into B tier. 12 was Wallace Stegner, Angle of Repose. For the longest time, I always thought this title was Angel of Repose, which personally I think is a cooler title, but Angle of Repose. This book was written as if it was like the next Gone with the Wind or Lonesome Dove or whatever. It's kind of written like it's trying to be the great American novel, especially kind of like frontier themed. I don't know, it's kind of just Gone with the Wind, Lonesome Dove, that kind of style of story. But I just thought the book was so incredibly dull. Just the writing and the characters and the plot, it was just dull. So I would give this book D tier. 13 on the list was D.H. Lawrence, Sons and Lovers. This is a book I did not know what to expect, and I'm still pretty divided on it. I can't really tell if the story or plot is any good, really. The main problem was the writing was kind of a little bit dull, but worst of all was the dialogue. The dialogue was written in kind of phonetic spelling or whatever, so it's showing all the abbreviations for all their dialogue, and it just sounds like they're speaking like they're from the 1600s or 1500s or whatever. I don't even know when this book is set, but the dialogue is just so old-fashioned, like they say thee and thou and all this stuff, and it's just unappealing. And then on top of that, to have the phonetic spelling, it's just difficult to read. And what happens for me when I read that is I'm trying to translate each word into the proper spelling and to know, okay, that's what this word is, that's what this word is. And when I do that, I forget about what the previous word was. So I just wind up not being able to follow the dialogue at all, because I just forget, and it just goes in one ear and out the other because I'm trying to translate it into proper dialogue, proper English. And so the dialogue just becomes unreadable. So to me, that was kind of the flaw of this book and kept me from really enjoying it and getting into it. Beyond that, is there a good story here? I don't really know. It's just the dialogue was just made it unreadable for me. So I would put this in C tier. There may be a good story in here, but I could not get into it because of the dialogue. 14 was Lloyd Alexander, The Book of Three. This is a book I'd never heard of before, and my thoughts on it were it was highly derivative of Lord of the Rings, and for that I could give the book a D or an E tier because I just did not find it original at all. But kind of accepting that, I did read the whole thing, and I don't want to say I enjoyed it, but I was able to read the whole thing. So I'm going to reluctantly put it into C tier. Okay, buckle in. This one's going to be kind of fun. The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. I had never heard of this story. I did not know what to expect. I was kind of expecting something like 1890s, 1900, kind of like a romance maybe, but that's not what it is. It's apparently a children's story, and my biggest problem with this book was overuse of the word little. I had the same problem with Little Women by Louisa May Alcott, and I just kept noticing these words little throughout the book, and it drove me crazy. So what I wound up doing is I highlighted all of them. Because, why did I highlight them? Because I knew I was not going to give this book to someone else. This book is basically going in the trash. But let's go through these uses of the word little. Page 1. She had a little thin face and a little thin body. Still on the first page. She had not wanted a little girl at all. Still on the first page. So when she was a sickly, fretful, ugly little baby, she was kept out of the way. Second page. By the time she was 6 years old, she was as tyrannical and selfish as a little pig as ever lived. Still second page. She stuck big scarlet hibiscus blossoms into little heaps of earth. Third page. Her hair was like curly silk and she had a delicate little nose. Fifth page. Everyone was too panic-stricken to think of a little girl no one was fond of. Still that page. She saw a little snake gliding around and watching her, and then a little bit later, she was not frightened because he was a harmless little thing. Next page. She looked an ugly, cross little thing. Same page. I am Mary Lennox, the little girl said. Same page. There was no one in the bungalow but herself and the little rustling snake. Next page. But as she knew very little. Next page. Basil was a little boy. 2 pages later. She was very much absorbed in her own little boy and girl. Same page. My word, she's a plain little piece of goods. Same page. Because she was standing a little apart from them. Next page. But she had never seemed really to be anyone's little girl. Same page. It would have made her angry to think people imagined she was her little girl. Next page. And she folded her thin little black-gloved hands in her lap. 3 pages later. Said sour little Mary. 2 pages later. Stood on the road before the little outside platform. Same page. The little girl found herself seated. Same page. The carriage lamps cast rays of light a little distance ahead of them. Next page. Then they had passed a church and a vicarage and a little shop window. Next page. Carriage passed over a little bridge. Same page. She looked a very small, odd, little black figure. That just drove me crazy. How can you have that many uses of the word little in such a short time? Are you trying to drive readers crazy? I think it's just terrible writing. I don't care that it's written for kids. You should not write that way. That's just bad writing. So this goes into E tier, and it's never getting out of it. 16 was James Fenimore Cooper, The Last of the Mohicans. Now, I really wanted to read this whole book just because, I don't know, I just wanted to be able to read the whole thing. But the problem here is Cooper's writing is just so boring and thick and wordy, and also the same problem as before. He has the problem with the dialogue. It's really old-fashioned-y. I don't know if there is a good story here. I sense there might be, which is why I want to see the movie, especially with Daniel Day-Lewis. A lot of people rave about that movie. I have not seen it or any Last of the Mohican films. The Last of the Mohicans may be a good story. I don't know. But in Cooper's hands, it's a failure. So I would reluctantly put it into C tier. 17 is Carson McCullers, The Heart is a Lonely Hunter. Now, this book I did give 5 stars, but just like before, can I put it alongside The City of Dreaming books? Eleanor Oliphant is completely fine. The Hunt for Red October, The Princess Bride, Harry Potter. No. So I'm going to put it in A tier. I don't know exactly what makes this a good book, if it is even that. I still feel that there is something special about this book. People should read it. I still cannot say why, but I do think it should be read. So I'm going to put The Heart is a Lonely Hunter in A tier. 18 was Maya Angelou, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. Now, I was very pessimistic about this because I do not like poetry, and Maya Angelou is very well known as a poet. Basically, the way Sheldon Cooper in The Big Bang Theory, the way he views geology is how I view poetry. poetry is just something separate from, I was going to say writing. That's how much I dislike it, basically. It's so distant from fiction. I just do not like poetry at all. But on top of that, on top of being the work of a poet, this book is apparently a memoirs. And I did not realize that until I started writing my review, because I just did not like this book at all as I started to read it. So very early on, like within 3 pages, I just knew, nuh-uh, I'm not reading this book. Basically, when I went to do the review, I found out this was a memoirs. And I do not like memoirs. So it's a memoirs by a poet. That is like the perfect storm of just not for me. So I put this in D tier. I know I want to put it in E tier because it's basically no, hell no. But it's just not for me. 19 was Jude the Obscure by Thomas Hardy. This is a book I didn't know anything about. And I really don't know quite what to make of it. I didn't really enjoy it too much. Just the plot, the characters, the writing. It wasn't really working for me. So I'm going to put it in D tier. I just didn't get far enough into the book to enjoy it. And I did read the summary of what the book is about. And frankly, I'm kind of glad I did not read the whole thing. I don't really want to get into it. But it's basically this guy falls in love kind of with his cousin, I think. And so they're kind of trying to figure that out. And then I think he meets another girl who doesn't want to have sex really. And so they're trying to figure that out. Maybe that's actually his cousin, I don't know. But it's just kind of weird and unenjoyable. So I put it in D tier. 20 was Faust by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. And this is apparently just part 1. Now, I did think this book would be harder to read because it's a long book, but I found out the left side is German and the right side is English. So really, this book is only about half as long as it would imply because I'm not reading the German. I can't read the German. So anyway, I was like, oh good, I only need to read half of this, even though it's part 1. Now, I read about 3, 4, 5 pages, and I was absolutely not being able to follow a single word of it, and I was reading the English part, but I just could not really follow any of this. It was going in one ear and out the other. So I just knew very early on, this book is doing nothing for me, so it goes into D tier. Last of all was 21, Tim O'Brien, The Things They Carried. Now, I gave this book a 5-star review, and I have to say this is a definite S tier. So of all the 21 books to read in 2021, Tim O'Brien, The Things They Carried is the only S tier book. This is a book about like a memoirs, imagine that, after what I just said about Maya Angelou, of his time in the Vietnam War. So I really, from the beginning, did not expect much. I did not expect to enjoy this. I thought I'd just read a few pages, get it out of the way, and then move on. But the start of this book, the first chapter, was just perfect. The second chapter was perfect. A chapter or 2 later, when he goes up to Canada because he's thinking of crossing over to flee the country because he got a draft notice, that chapter was perfect. And just as the book kept going, it was just perfect, perfect, perfect. Even when I began to get bored by the book and think, what does this story really have to do with anything? It would come together and it would make sense and it would have a purpose. So everything in this book was really perfect. And I think this book, in a way, is like poetry. And I know what I said about poetry. But this is good poetry. This is a good book. It's a good memoirs. It's a good novel. So this is a definite S tier book. So that is it. So thank you guys for watching. I think I will soon make a video of 22 books to read in 2022. So be on the lookout for that. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.